Welcome to Be Less Stupid. I'm the host, John Hotchkiss. On June 20th, 2017, I posted a video about a friend of mine, Staff Sergeant James Holland, a U.S. Marine. Now stick with me. This story that I'm about to tell you takes a lot of turns. Mostly bad, one or two good. The story starts a few months before September 11th, 2001, when 20-year-old James Holland joins the Marines. It includes combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a startling number of concussions. There's a marriage, and 3 years ago a baby. There's also a botched surgery by the VA, a botched surgery that could have been avoided if only the VA would have approved the use of a device that would have helped him heal. It's a device that retails for about $300, and the VA refused to pay for it. They said he wasn't entitled to that level of care.
So I deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan. I did 5 total deployments. 3 to Iraq, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and 2 to Afghanistan, Operation Enduring Freedom.
Cut to today, July 7th, 2017. Today, James Holland and his wife Angela and their 3-year-old baby got in James's truck, and they drove a few hours to a friend's for the next few nights. They'll sleep on their friend's couch. Yes, it's summer, but no, they're not on vacation. They're homeless. Let me tell you a little bit about James. He's from a small Texas town. As a teenager, he had a motorcycle that he rode too much and too fast. He realized that his life was going nowhere and that he needed structure and discipline. He joined the Marines at age 20. The day was January 18th, the year 2000, just a handful of months before terrorists with box cutters flew planes into the Twin Towers. He was trained by the Marines and deployed overseas. On his first mission, he assisted with the evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Yemen after the USS Cole was attacked. Then he served 5 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan as an infantryman. For those of you who don't know, James was on the front line of the war. He wasn't protected in a secure base camp. He wasn't an officer secured away from all the fighting. Like thousands of other infantrymen, James carried an M4. He took ground. He defended ground. He killed the enemy, and he ducked when the enemy fired back.
Guys aren't getting the services either. They're still not getting the service. And honestly, I mean, this is what it's like. They want the old guys to just die off, and they want the young guys to kill themselves. And that's the exact feeling I get from being at this place or being at the VA this long. That's exactly what happens, and it's unfortunate. We got to stop it. We got to do something. It's got to change.
He was a soldier that higher-ups relied on. There came a point where he was in charge of a squad of men and multiple millions in warfare weaponry. While serving in combat, he got 14 concussions from being too close when IEDs exploded. IEDs are improvised explosive devices. It's C4 or another explosive crudely mixed with nails or ball bearings or other shrapnel, and it's all packed into a container, like a length of PVC pipe or the like. It's got a power source and some material that initiates a detonation. The enemy hid these improvised bombs all over Iraq. One of James's jobs was to find them. They might be in a building, or among some trash, or inside a teddy bear on the side of a road, or just covered up by some dirt, for example, or buried in a field.
Slow down. Jesus Christ.
In the beginning of the war, they had long wires that led to a detonator operated by the enemy.
We pulled up a possible wire.
As the war progressed, the bombs got a little more sophisticated and could be triggered remotely with a cell phone, a radio, or even a garage door opener.
A power source, like batteries. A main charge, like homemade explosives. A detonator, to set off the main charge. And a switch, like a pressure plate or tripwire that closes the circuit and triggers the IED.
In either case, an enemy soldier would hide near the partially hidden bomb. And when American soldiers got close, the enemy would signal, and the bombs would be detonated and explode.
Roger. I believe that a hostile act that is in the same areas that we seldom cover something up. Roger, can you accept Roger, good copy. They're happy for us.
Oh! Never mind!
Break. It just detonated by itself. Alpha wind 180.
They just blew themselves up.
They just blew themselves up.
They'd produce a vicious, high-pressure blast wave and propel the shrapnel. And sometimes, if this group of enemy combatants was more sophisticated or more cruel, the IED might be packed with toxic chemicals or fire-starting chemicals too. In some cases, the enemy was tricky. They'd hide 2 bombs near each other. When a group of US soldiers would discover the first bomb and attempt to neutralize it, the spotters would signal, and then the second IED would detonate, killing or wounding even more US soldiers.
Shit! Go!
Lots of James's friends died, and just as many were injured or lost limbs. James was within a few feet of these explosions countless times. They knocked him out. In some cases, he was inside a vehicle, other times on foot. First, the blast wave in and of itself is devastating, and that can give you a concussion. Then, the blast can throw you and you hit your head, say inside the vehicle, or just as likely, your head hits the ground if you were on foot.
Yes, I've had quite a bit of concussions. I was knocked out from blasts, so like an IED blast, improvised explosive device. I believe in my record there was the doctor that did the TBI examination before I got out told me there was 14.
Just to give you some context, in the NFL, if a player is suspected of having a concussion during the game resulting from a hit, he is removed and he cannot return to the game that day. He's then monitored by the medical staff and then must demonstrate lucidity and all cognitive motor functions before he's able to return to even practice with the team, which perhaps could be as many as several days later. The truth is that today we know that even just a few repeated concussions or traumatic brain injuries, like those suffered by James Holland, will result in diminished thinking capacity, diminished sensation, like sight or balance, diminished language capacity, including communication, expression and understanding, and diminished emotional capacity, including depression, anxiety, personality changes, aggression, inappropriate social behavior, and often suicide. Repeated concussions will also likely cause early onset epilepsy, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. After his combat duty, James was a drill instructor for the Marines, training new recruits who would head to Iraq and Afghanistan. 3 years later, James became an IED specialist, teaching Marines right before they shipped out to war the devastating effects these improvised bombs had, how these improvised explosive devices are made, how they are deployed, how to spot them, and how to dismantle them.
The issues that we face working within the VA circle. So it's very humbling to have to kind of reach out to family, friends, the military community to assist us and help us and support us when really I believe that the VA should be stepping up. The VA is deciding to pass us around from state organization to state organization, and every time we get there they say, well, we don't know why you were sent to us. This isn't something that we can do.
James gave the Marines 12 and a half years. While on duty as a drill instructor, he injured his shoulder. Now, as a Marine, he was taught to suck it up, to not complain, to deal with the pain, because that is what a Marine is supposed to do. And that is precisely what James did. And after giving the Marines 12 and a half years of service, he decided it was time to move on. In 2012, he went to the VA, where it was determined that he had only about 70% mobility in his right shoulder, and his constant chronic pain was verified. It was determined that he needed surgery on his shoulder. Then James waited for 5 years for his operation. He was told he needed the surgery in 2012. The VA got around to him in 2017. In 2015, the Obama administration passed the Surface Transportation and Veterans Healthcare Choice Improvement Act. Because vets were waiting an incredibly long time for treatment, this new legislation made it possible for them to now have surgeries performed by doctors who were outside of the VA. And those doctors would be reimbursed for their work by the Veterans Administration. So, a few weeks prior to James's surgery, his civilian doctor wrote him a prescription for a device called a cryocuff. This cryocuff does a couple of things. First, it has several adjustable settings that allow the shoulder to heal by resting the arm in a number of different positions. And this is important. You can set the cryocuff to immobilize your arm like this, or like this, or like this, or like this. The point being, you don't want your arm to be immobilized in any one position for too long. Otherwise, the scar tissue that forms could cause your shoulder to freeze. So even though you have a surgery, the resulting scar tissue could actually make your mobility worse if it's not properly managed. So with the cryocuff, you rest your arm in one position for a day or two, then you rest it in a slightly different position, then in a slightly different position from that, and so on until you heal. And it's this movement that prevents the buildup of scar tissue that will freeze the shoulder. The other thing about the cryocuff is that you attach a couple of hoses to it and a little mechanized ice cooler, and it will circulate ice water throughout, which helps control the swelling in your shoulder after the surgery. If you were to buy one of these cryocuffs, depending on where you bought it and where you lived, it might cost maybe $250 at the low end and maybe as much as, say, $400 at the high end. Well, James took his prescription from his now VA-approved civilian doctor to the VA pharmacy, and the pharmacist told him that they would not honor the prescription. The device, they told him, was too expensive. They said his VA insurance plan did not cover the more expensive cryocuff. What James's insurance plan offered in its place was this one-size-fits-all flimsy cloth shoulder brace. This cloth shoulder brace did not have multiple positions in which to rest and immobilize the arm and shoulder during healing. It had one position. The cloth shoulder brace had one position in which it would hold James's shoulder and arm while he recovered from his surgery. Not only is the cloth shoulder brace flimsy, it also doesn't have any mechanism by which ice-cold water would flow through it in order to reduce the swelling that occurs following a surgery. The cloth brace had one position. So, after his surgery, James rested and immobilized his shoulder in one position because the brace didn't offer any other option. He couldn't rest it like this, and then this, or only one position, and he held it like this for several months.
The VA isn't as giving as you think. Like I said, the surgeon wrote me a prescription for that, for a specific cuff to try to help prevent any type of frozen shoulder or anything with my arm, and the VA is like, you don't need that. So they literally strapped my arm to my torso for 6 weeks and then looked surprised when the damn thing didn't work after 6 weeks. I was like, what?
Guess what happened after he kept his arm in just one position for several months? Excessive scar tissue formed, and James's shoulder froze.
I can move my elbow. So is that about 10 in your arm? Move my hand, my wrist, my elbow. Other than that,
his shoulder froze just like the doctor who wrote the prescription for the cryocuff said that it would. The cryocuff, which the VA said the soldier with the 14 concussions, who also suffers from PTSD and traumatic brain injury, wasn't entitled to because it was too expensive. After waiting 5 years for his surgery, the mobility in his shoulder went from about 70% to now about 10%. Along with the 5 or 6 appointments James has each week for his PTSD and TBI, he now has 2 or 3 more appointments for his shoulder. He meets with a therapist who stretches his arm and another who supervises rehab training. The pain that James experiences in his shoulder is constant and chronic. For nearly 6 months, he's kept ice on it nearly every waking moment. He told me the ice just numbed the pain. Why ice? Why not one of those opioid medications? Well, James went the opioid route for a few months. And then one weekend, when his prescription ran out and the VA wouldn't refill it until Monday, that weekend, James discovered he wasn't just taking the pain-relieving pills. It turns out he needed them. And well, this Marine didn't want the addiction monkey on his back, so he decided to quit the opioids, cold turkey. And the Marine who did 5 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan, who too many times was standing too close when the enemy detonated IEDs, told me that quitting the opioid cold turkey was the hardest, most painful, and worst thing that he's ever experienced.
That's the worst, to always be on alert, thinking like, if something goes on, what am I going to do? And then all of a sudden not have the use of your arm. Like, you become so, I don't know, you become very, what's the word I'm looking for? I lost it. Vulnerable. It's a very vulnerable feeling. It sucked. I mean, it really did. Like, I didn't want to leave the room. Because I was worried about leaving my room. It was like, how can I protect myself and family if something happens? And I can't even use my arm. It weighed a lot on me. It played a lot of factors in what goes on in my day-to-day and my psyche.
And remember, he's got 14 concussions from being too close when an IED exploded. So he uses ice from the freezer. Ice he scoops into a plastic bag. Plastic bag because he can't afford the neoprene shoulder cuff that they sell at CVS or Walgreens with the reusable ice pack for about $40.
To do this, I used to not be able to get my arm up here on the counter. It's much more of a pain in the butt than it is right now. Making strides here.
And that's not even the half of it. For nearly 2 years prior to the surgery, James Holland, the U.S. Marine, worked as an operations manager at a FedEx facility in Portland, Oregon. Each week, a portion of his salary was taken out for taxes and disability. If a worker is injured and can't work, they can file for disability, and the state will pay them a portion of what they were making until they heal and can return to work. James applied to the state of Oregon for disability. He's injured, and he can't work while his shoulder heals. The state of Oregon has now twice denied his disability request. During one conversation with the disability people, James was told that he was denied because he technically could work. And I'm quoting here, they said, as a call center operator, for example. First, the state doesn't get to decide what job injured soldiers have or get to do. Plus, James suffers from PTSD and TBI. Can you imagine what happens when an irate customer calls customer service? James picks up, the customer starts yelling, that triggers James, and either he starts yelling louder than they are, or halfway through the conversation, James just forgets what they're even arguing about. Because one side effect of his TBI is that he has terrible short-term memory. A Marine with PTSD and TBI is not who a company wants taking calls from irate customers. Then, on top of all of that, Angela, James's wife, was inexplicably removed from the state of Oregon's program that paid her a small stipend to be James's caregiver. Because of his shoulder and brain injuries, James can, some weeks, have as many as 10 doctor's appointments. And he's not permitted to drive. So Angela has to take him. And because Angela has to take him to 10 appointments a week, she can't have a job of her own. Now, in 2016, the state of Oregon removed 207 families from their paid caregiver program. For no reason, 207 families were just removed. No more benefits. It made a minor splash in the state's papers. So for nearly a year, Angela has gotten no pay for the work that she does. Then, James and Angela had a baby. And while the baby was in utero, Angela's insurance through the VA covered her doctor's visits. However, once their daughter was born, the baby had no insurance. And after the birth, the baby had a few minor complications, and that cost James and Angela nearly $20,000. They got bills from the hospital for nearly $20,000. It's taken them 3 years to pay that off. So today, July 7th, James and his wife and his daughter are homeless. For the last 6 months, the family stayed together in this one room at a place called Fisher House, which is a charity that has facilities on a number of VA campuses. The family was given 6 months to stay. Unfortunately, it's going to take a lot longer for James to recuperate. Remember, he only had that simple piece of cloth, not the $400 cryo cuff. Now, the VA will provide a roof for James to recover, but just James. He could live in a facility like a college dorm or a youth hostel just for veterans, but they won't provide space for his family. And James, quite reasonably, does not want to break the family up. So, as of today, July 7th, he and Angela and their daughter have moved out of the Fisher House. They put the few belongings that they still have in storage. They're in their car, and for the next few weeks, they're going to spend a night here and a night there on friends' couches in Oregon and in Washington and California because they're homeless. Oh, and James won't be seeing the doctors for his shoulder or his brain injuries. You might be asking, what about savings? Haven't they saved any money? They don't have any money in savings because they've previously spent it all on various treatments for James that weren't covered by the VA. For example, like, say, massage or acupuncture. Now, James does get a small stipend from the Marines for his service, but that monthly check alone is not enough to cover rent and food for the entire family. Plus, then there's gas for the car, insurance deductibles, etc. And because he doesn't get disability from the state of Oregon, and Angela isn't being paid for being his caregiver, they cannot demonstrate enough monthly income to rent an apartment. Turns out landlords are wary of people who don't show a consistent source of income. I suppose, yes, he could put down first and last month's rent and security deposit, but then they just don't have enough to make the monthly rental payments. Last month, James's brother set up a GoFundMe page. In 2 weeks, he raised about $15,000, all of which went to pay down their hospital bill for the baby's birth and other credit card debt. 2 weeks ago, I posted a video that told some of James's story. And since then, we've raised another $15,000, some of which they have been able to save. But again, the preponderance went to pay off bills for previous treatment, and the rest is needed to cover ongoing treatment that the VA does not cover. Now, this is the part where I ask you to help. Please do not click like or the sad face to indicate that this story makes you sad. And please, no comments about how this family is in your prayers or how God will help. Unfortunately, neither of those will put food in a baby's mouth or a permanent roof over the family's head. Please donate. This is not how America is supposed to treat its vets. But the system has failed, and it has failed James and Angela Holland. If you make a donation right now, the Hollands will use the money to rent an apartment to keep the family together in a real home while James recuperates from his botched surgery. And look, if you can't afford to make a donation, that's fine. Not everyone can afford to donate, no matter how noble the cause. If this is you, then please just share the video. And in the space where you get to add your own text, just tell your friends it's a worthy cause and encourage them to watch this video. And here's something else that you can easily do. If you're a person who knows someone in Washington who can help. Please share the video with them. Or maybe you know someone in the national media who can help spread this story. Then maybe the proper authorities will hear, and they'll force the state of Oregon to pay James the disability that he's entitled to, and they'll pay Angela the money that she's entitled to for being James's caregiver. Also, you can like our Facebook page. I'll be sharing updates about James and Angela. And I've got the results of an unexpected experiment. I shared the first video with members of pro-Trump Facebook groups, as well as with liberal Facebook groups. The comments that each group shared, well, they'll shock you. So if you want to see these videos and lots more stories about politics and human behavior, like our page. And these future stories will magically appear then in your Facebook timeline. And remember, it's still all totally free. Okay, that's it. I'll see you next time. And thank you for donating. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.